Good morning, everybody. This is an unofficial, just a round table. The committee has been very fortunate to have someone who's going to be the guest speaker at the Chamber of Commerce this afternoon, Dr. Cezar Quiambao. And he's accompanied by George Yolo. They've been here as guests of the President of the Chamber of Commerce. Chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, Pete Sgro. Actually the first day of session last year, I introduced Bill number 3. And it was supposed to be my signature piece of legislation, but I promised the administration that I was going to hold off on having a hearing on it because the administration was working with a procurement advisory commission, and they were supposed to review the bill, and they were supposed to review other procurement proposed legislation. Senator Atta has since attended a number of training courses on procurement and actually introduced a number of pieces of legislation. So that broke that dam open, and the council has not reported back to us. And so it was very timely when you called me and you were talking about BOTs and BOOs, and I said, that's my piece of legislation. It's number 3 on the, it was introduced within the first hour of the new legislature. And Pete mentioned to me that he had been working with Dr. Quiambao, and that he's an expert in this area, has been doing this for a considerable amount of time. And I asked Pete, and he was very gracious about allowing and bringing Dr. Quiambao to speak to us this morning to help everybody understand what the import of this piece of legislation is, what it has done in other places, and how it has helped. I'm starting to get a little sort of, I don't know, concerned about whether or not sometimes my message is lost because I am the messenger. And so I'm glad that somebody else is going to be the one that's going to be the messenger in this, because sometimes people think that I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm glad that it's going to be someone who actually has done this for over 20 years and can talk to us and inform the public about the benefits that this can have, and then we'll just discuss potentials. But Pete, why don't you introduce your guest, and you need to push the red button.
Introducing Dr. Quiambao and Mr. Yulo. We've probably known each other now for close to 10 years. And, you know, at least for me, sometimes we look at laws, and there are people that will be opposed to laws, but they don't see really what the result of the law is if it passes. And, you know, my perspective of what this law does is, you know, I've read all of it. But the reason why I've only read it once is because I've seen what it does. You know, Mr. Quiambao could address the details of this, but, you know, I've seen it work where, you know, highways are being built without the government putting up a penny. I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about how he was able to create a national driver's license system automated. Not one penny of government money used, not one government employee was terminated. You know, it's an incredible system that I've never seen anything like it. I mean, even when your driver's license is about to expire, you get a text that tells you to go get it renewed. And the government also, in some cases, you know, creates a new revenue stream that it didn't have before. But in all of these, you know, it works out really well, not just for the government, but, you know, in also being able to basically fund a government type of service, whether that's an automated service or any type of infrastructure projects. Another one is, let's say, water, wastewater systems. You know, we always see that we have to borrow the money, and, you know, I'm finding more and more in seeing the results of what Mr. Quiambao has done, not just in the Philippines, but other places. And Vietnam is moving in this direction now, is that you have a lot of companies out there that are willing to put up just from somebody that has observed the benefits of this happening, and also um, in the Philippines right now, the economic impact I think that this is having. HSBC just recently, and Vice Speaker, I may have provided that study to your staff, but HSBC just recently issued a forecast over the next 50 years of the top growing countries in the world. And the Philippines is ranked number 5 out of every country in the world. Um, it surpasses Japan, it surpasses the United States. And, when you look at the study itself and you see the Philippines focus as the opening cover of this forecast, a lot of it is attributed to a lot of different things, but it's also the encouragement of the government to have the private sector say, okay, here, we don't want to go float a bond, we don't want to do this. We're going to put out an RFP, and you got to come up with $300 million, or you got to automate our system. Like, when I see his system, it's a no-brainer for, our system at Rev and Tax, and to have it 100% funded by a private company, I think can get it, rolling much faster. But with that, I'll turn it over to Cesar and George.
Before we do, I really should, Dr. Quiambao, this is the Speaker of the Guam Legislature, Speaker Judith Wampat, Dr. Richard Quiambao, and Mr. George Yulo. And this is Senator Dennis Rodriguez, youngest member of our legislature. And I should recognize everybody: Senator Frank Uggan, Senator Tony Atta, Senator Tom Atta, Senator Aileen Yamashita, and Senator Chris Duenas. And so, Doctor, please.
Good morning, honorable senators. It's really an honor to be in front of legislators, state of Guam, and I would say I don't know why Peter or Pete considers me as an expert on PPP or infrastructure development, but mind you, actually I started my career in Indonesia, and I came back to the Philippines in 1994 during the time of President Ramos. It was during the time of President Ramos that the public-private partnership was introduced through what we called the Republic Act 7718. It was amended during the time of President Ramos. And the first project that I implemented or structured under the PPP program was the Metro Manila Skyway, Stage 1. That is the construction of an elevated highway from Buendia to Bicutan, and the upgrading of an existing upgrade from Bicutan to Alabang. The first project that we invested costed us around $514 million at no guarantee from the government, neither commercial guarantee from the government. We took all the risks, including traffic risks. When we started this project, Filipinos don't want to pay toll fees. As a matter of fact, the Philippine National Construction Corporation, who has the franchise for these expressways, was sued to the Supreme Court because, as I said, Filipinos don't want to pay toll fees. That was the time when I started negotiating the structuring of the first Metro Manila Skyway project. And mind you, immediately after the Supreme Court decided that they have no jurisdiction or technical capacity to evaluate such a project or the franchise of PNCC, immediately my partners, the Indonesian group, immediately started to prepare the necessary technical feasibility study. So you can see that the Metro Manila Skyway project actually pump-primed the economic development of our country. Of course, course, there's still traffic congestion, but actually, this elevated highway connected the provinces from the south to the north, and it really improved the flow of goods and services. Uh, well, of course, there should be a balancing act, between public interest and the private interest, and of course, the ability of the government to render public service. Public service and public interest is also the number one factor in, promoting projects. But infrastructure really is very important in any country, especially a developing country like the Philippines. After this, there was a call to computerize the government agencies, like the Land Transportation Office, equivalent to your Department of Motor Vehicle in the mainland. We patterned it after the Virginia Department of Motor Vehicles. And before the computerization, it will take a driver to apply for a license for 6 months. After computerization, you can get your driver's license real time, anywhere in the Philippines, less than 1 hour. The president just renewed his driver's license last February, and we don't know about it. Until after our people from the field said, "Sir, the president renewed his driver's license and he was very happy because he got it in 27 minutes." Of course,
No VIP. He fall in line.
Yeah.
Got in line. Stood up and followed everybody else.
before computerization, the revenue of the government was around 2 to 3 billion pesos. That was 16 years ago. Today, revenue is around 15 billion pesos because of the efficiency and the accuracy of all the charges and the penalties that every violator should pay are properly collected. Of course, less corruption now compared before, because sometimes when the driver wants to get his driver's license immediately and doesn't want to wait for 6 months, he has to pay somebody to be able to get that driver's license on time. Given all of this, we saw that information technology is like a tollway. I call it an electronic tollway. When I went and knocked the door of the World Bank IFC, International Finance Corporation, to borrow money for the Land Transportation Office project. First meeting, I was denied. I was advised that it's a green project. It's not within the what you call requirements of IFC to finance. But I went back to them through my friend in Washington that this is not a green project. The agency is almost 100 years old, manually operating all their services, and we are just automating the services of the Land Transportation Office. I told them it's like an infrastructure. It's an electronic highway. To cut the story short, I got investments of $25 million from IFC under their infrastructure division, financing the IT project. With the success of LTO came another bidding process, which is the computerization of the Land Registration Authority. There's so many fake titles in the Philippines. There are around 25 million titles, and we have converted all of this electronically into our database. Now you can get your titles based on, because because titling sometimes requires some legal due diligence on the part of the government. But verification takes few hours. Issuance of certified true copies, not more than 2 days, and things like that. Again, collection of revenues for the government increased tremendously because of the efficiency and effectiveness of the system. Well, of course, there is a negative part of it because we have to charge what you call computer fee for every transaction that runs through our system. But to us, charging users fee allows the government to have an equitable distribution of development. For example, in the Philippines, people from the south are complaining. How come the central government has been using taxes collected from them to develop Metro Manila? And that's not fair. So with the introduction of the PPP, or what you call the private sector taking care of infrastructure development through users pay, so only users of infrastructure are the ones that are taxed. So that frees the central government the funds, and this will be used to develop missionary areas. So what else I could say? What is very important, I think, in any project, whether PPP or procured project, is the importance of transparency. Public must be convinced that in awarding a project, there is a complete transparency. And I think people won't complain. And I'm happy to tell you that of all my projects, there was never an issue of corruption. And it really improved public service to the people. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Last 2 years ago, when I went to visit the PPP office in Manila, I understood when you mentioned you got an investment from ICF,
IFC.
IFC, that that the Philippines for some reason gets some kind of investments from Germany, Australia, and Britain to assist in these PPP projects. Can you share with us how that is done?
Well, you see, to be able to structure a successful PPP project, there are many requirements to have successful bidding process. And you know, the government at that time does not have the necessary funding requirements to prepare a project for a viable bidding process. So, they don't have funds to prepare the necessary feasibility study. They don't have funds to prepare the proper legal due diligence. So, in short, if you will notice that, you know, sometimes our PPP projects in the Philippines are sometimes called only for PowerPoint presentation. See, because we have been talking about PPP from the time of President Ramos, which I was part of it at the beginning. Then you have President Estrada, President Arroyo. And most of the PPP projects that are within the pipeline have been identified since the time of President Ramos, Estrada, and Arroyo. But we were not able to bid it out successfully because of the lack of the necessary feasibility studies. You have to have a detailed feasibility study for every project so that it will give the bidders the right proposals and also for the government to really get the real value of such projects. So I'm happy to inform you that all these funding agencies, including the Asian Development Bank, has banded together and provided the Philippines what you call the Infrastructure Development Monitoring Fund to finance the preparation of every project before it's bidded out. Now, once bidded out, the successful bidder will reimburse the cost of the development of that project so that the fund will have continuing, funding for future projects. So I think that's what you are trying to.
Yes. And Peter knows that because we are U.S. territory. Peter knows that because we are U.S. territory, the possibility of us receiving money from Germany and United Kingdom or Australia are nil to none. I mean, it's just not going to happen. The United States is not going to allow that. But last week, Pete, I sent you an email where I put there. You went to some class on some tax credits. Could that possibly be some of the basis by which we could underwrite some of the projects that we'd like to build here as PPP projects?
I think it would be a little different. I think that the way that the PPP projects work under the Philippine law is 100% is privately financed. And for example, when Mr. Quiambao mentioned about the tolls, if a private company was going to invest, let's say $500 million to build a road, or let's say, $50 million to upgrade all of our water systems here, obviously they have to have some type of return on their investment. So, they'll get some percentage of a negotiated rate between the government and the private sector, and that's the way it's done in other countries that use this. What you're referring to is new market tax credits, which is different than the light tech credits that we've heard. Carlos is very much involved, Carlos Camacho, in the affordable housing tax credits. The IRS issues also what are called new market tax credits. The new market tax credits, though, are very different than a PPP structure. They're actually just some incentives by the federal government to develop things totally different than affordable housing. For example, they've been used, we talked about this, they've been used to help provide some funding for purposes of building a hospital. There's a very successful clinical area in the state of Washington. Gosh, I mean, if you just Google it, you'll be surprised at what developments. But under the new market tax credits, where there is some similarity is that the IRS requires that everything that is built under the new market tax credits has to be privately managed and privately developed. So the developer does have to come up with the financing, the difference between the total cost of something and the new market tax credits that are issued. There's currently some, and I've been following it with the National Development Council, who I've been to 2 of their forums, following Congress right now in terms of where they're going with the new market tax credits, but it seems like they're starting to wanting to increase them because they're finding it to be actually a less expensive avenue for governments to be able to build buildings for government services that are owned and operated by private companies. And if I can just add one thing that I mentioned to the Vice Speaker, and Cezar and George probably know this, is that we currently have laws in the books that if we don't amend them as part of your bill, Mr. Speaker, we have to also look at the ability to, you're never going to finance something with a lease for 5 years. You got to be able to increase the lease. I mean, I couldn't walk into Bank of Guam in a 5-year term to go build a new hospital or to go, do some of the things like whether it's building roads, building infrastructure projects, or
one of the reasons why I introduced this piece of legislation was the fact that I was really upset about the fact that the airport engaged in these long-term, 50-year leases, and now it's a 60-year lease with three different business concerns to build these buildings alongside the airport. This I think would have been a perfect BOT, because the airport had no money or didn't have the money for these kind of developments. They could have had these developers, these businesses, build these buildings. They could lease it for as long as they needed to recover their investment and a reasonable rate of return, and then return it to the government. But the way what we're having up there, we've leased these properties initially for 40 years, and we gave them the opportunity to build. They were supposed to build 3 buildings of $26 million apiece. They're now leasing the buildings back to the government agencies. They're making probably close to $26 million a year in lease payments, and the increase, they have a lease now for 60 years. So it's really strange, and it just really has, and it just is. But the thing is that there's no reason why we can't get BOTs to do something. I just spoke to Peter. I just came back last week from a maritime cruise convention, and I would be willing to even talk to the 3 developers that deal with the thing at the airport and say, I would like to make a proposal that you guys do a BOT down at the port, where you develop the cruise line, a cruise line terminal, and develop an area down there, but do it as a BOT and have a lease, and you operate it for only as long as it takes for you to recover your investment, plus a reasonable rate of return, not for the next 60 years, because eventually the port and the airport need to have those properties back to make the money that these 3 developers are now keeping for themselves and paying literally pennies on the dollar for land. And it really is, that was the impetus of my having Carlos write this and do all the research to try to put this together. It was just to try to make sure that the government didn't get taken advantage of in the future. That I have no problem with extending the lease period for as long as it takes to recover the investment, but not for 60 years, because the government wasn't created to provide businesses with the opportunity to take advantage of them to make all this money for the next 60 years. And so, but the government is there to try to make as much money for the operations of the airport, and if possible back to the general fund if that was possible. But we've lost that opportunity, and I'm hoping that in the future, that with the passage of this piece of legislation, that we'll be able to capture some of that money back with future development, because we've now reached our credit limit, and we can't really go out to the bond market anymore. And so if we're going to do anything in the future, it is going to have to be something where we engage the private enterprise in doing something. You want to come up and say something?
Yeah. I just wanted to make a couple of points. First of all, of course, in the utilities, the PPPs have certainly been in use, considerable, in particular with our power plants. So every new power plant that has come on in the past decade here has basically been through PPPs. The point that you bring up, Peter, about the allowing for a longer term lease, other developers who may be interested, then maybe through that publication, they will get to know about it and maybe provide some competition to the mix. But certainly PPP, at least in the utilities, has been used on a number of occasions.
I just want to bring back the discussion to the feasibility study that Dr. Quiambao had spoken of, because I think all the discussions you're saying, the starting point to make it a transparent bidding and very informative for the bidder, just like when you mentioned about the airport, there got to be a proper feasibility study that lays the groundwork of the bidding. And that's a very important component that in the developing countries we have Asian Bank and the World Bank to depend on, while in your case probably it is an opportunity to request for budget for the feasibility study phase before bidding. Now, that's one way of doing it. The nice thing about the PPP law is the inclusion of the provision for Swiss challenge, meaning there could be private sector participants who could be interested to preempt the government. For example, your airport, and an existing airport operator may say, hey, I'm interested to help Guam and do business in Guam. They have not yet started doing the feasibility study. I'm willing to do it as a private entity to do the feasibility study at no cost to the government, provided that I have the Swiss challenge component under the PPP law, which means I will do the study, I will do the proposal, and the government then can now accept the terms of reference of this proposal if it's agreeable to them. And you can throw it out to the public and say, anybody who wants to bid for this, and I can have the last say, I match the. That's right. Is that an existing law available now? Now this all wrapped up in the PPP in the Philippine context, right, Cezar? Yeah. With a very defined processes.
I think we included that in ours, didn't we, Carlos?
Yeah, I believe so. I just wanted to kind of give everyone here kind of a brief history of how we kind of got to this point. In 2011, actually, when Vice Speaker Cruz assumed chairmanship of the Procurement Committee, we wanted to look at how we could improve public-private partnerships on Guam. And, you know, as Senator Ada said, this is nothing new. In fact, Senator Ada introduced a bill that was actually patterned after this law for GWA, I believe in the mid-90s. But the preface for this was really, at least on our case, is that when we were looking at for example, the school leasebacks, we wanted to know whether the government was doing enough to properly evaluate the financials of these projects that were being proposed. And, you know, there are mechanisms to do that, and we just didn't really see that in the existing, you know, laws of Guam. And what, you know, the nice thing about the Philippine law is that they kind of separate the bidding for the financials and for the project itself, the actual brick and mortar and the construction. So the evaluating committee would actually have to look at them differently. First, you kind of qualify to be able to bid with a project that the government is looking to have finance through the private entity, and then once you qualify, then the next stage is the actual financials. And the nice thing about this law is, if you look at it and if you read it carefully, it actually weighs all of the concessions. You know, in good PPP, the government and the private entity or the private proponent has to share in the rewards and also the risk of the project. And in the bidding process, they actually, I guess, account for all of the subsidies and the concessions that the government might make. For instance, providing land. For instance, providing tax credits, which we have done in the past. And then they actually weigh that. So if you had like 3 different bidders, they would actually weigh the fact that one company may have a subsidy from the government and the other may not. And the one, if all else is equal, the guy that doesn't have that subsidy or provides a better concessions on their part actually wins the bid. So that's kind of the gist of why we kind of looked at this as a model for the local law. But yeah, that's just what I wanted to add.
If I could add something, and Cesar and George, maybe you can touch on this and maybe use the LTO as an example. When I was suggesting about making the terms of the lease longer,
I wasn't referring to just making it long, right? Not just like, okay, let's pass a law that makes a law, a 30-year lease. It would basically be a term where the government and the private company that's putting up the money to avoid exactly what you want to avoid, where there's the negotiation results for since 100% of the money is privately funded, the term of the agreement then is going to be the term that the government and the private company negotiate, so that at least the private company can recoup its investment and not more than the example which I'm familiar with, and that really avoids the problem that you described. But if I can maybe ask Cesar and maybe George, you could how did you negotiate when you first got for the automation of the how was the negotiation process as far as the term of the agreement to first implement the program?
Well, the project was initially the feasibility study and the bidding process was actually funded by the USAID. The USAID granted the Land Transportation Office around $500,000 to be used for the preparation of the feasibility study of the project, including the total bidding process until the award. So that made the project very, very transparent, viable. It was open to public bidding. And the basis of the bidding at that time, after the pre-qualification stage on the technical financial capability of the participants, was how much is the amount that the proponent is going to charge per transaction. We offered a bid of 168 pesos at the time in 1998. And our closest opponent offered 320 pesos. Now, why did I do that? Because at the time, I believed that if we make a little money on the first 10 years, any extension thereof will be gravy to us. So our bid price was almost break even on the first 10 years, with the hope that I will be extended for another 10 years. Now, that's the risk I took. And until today, I have not been extended.
The two projects that you engaged in, the driver's license and the land titles, I imagine if that was being manually operated, that was a lot of jobs that was involved there. Now, I don't know what the situation was when, insofar as staffing levels were concerned. I know that here, we're starting to outsource also the driver's license operations, but it was more so driven by the fact that the staff level has been attriting over the years, such that, but the workload has been going up, and so then now the queue is really long. And so when they outsourced it, nobody lost their job. Instead, what happened was they elevated their responsibilities to one of quality control and monitoring. What was your situation?
For the Land Transportation Office, Cesar mentioned earlier that the revenue when we started was 2 billion pesos. Now it's 15 billion pesos. Now, there were no increment. There was no increment in the manpower of that agency over the last 10 years. But the quality of the people's work, just like what you said, had improved because all the menial tasks has been taken over by the technology. And now they've basically got elevated to the next level position, which is more quality control, supervision, and more analytical job. But that's a process that you have to go through.
Because it seems that the biggest obstacle that has to be overcome is, that fear of computers are not going to replace all of us here.
We never displace any government officials or officers or workers in the process of our computerization of the last two projects that Cesar mentioned. The LTO is a $120 million project. The land transportation is a $200 million project that was privately funded and working with the government. By the way, when Cesar mentioned about this automation, we just provided the infrastructure, the facilities, automated the processes that the government dictated or is in existence, or the workflow that they approve. And the people using it are the same government agencies that has been trained to use the system. They own it. They own the data. They own the processes. We are just behind the scene providing the infrastructure.
Senators, if I can just add something. This is happening in some states, which is very similar to what they're saying, and I think it would really reduce the number of protests that we get here. George and Cesar talked about how, and they eventually pay whoever wins for the feasibility study that then dictates how do we bid this out. I was recently in Seattle, and where I took that course, and then I went to one in LA, and I learned, I didn't know they had this in the United States, where there's these small companies, and there's a couple of these experts that just work out of their homes. So we were just chatting a little bit about the biggest mistake you can make in any type of government project is to have a poor RFP written. And it seems to me that not just us, but even acceptance by the state of Washington. State of Washington about 10 years ago recognized that a lot of their government projects were a failure because the RFP was written poorly. But what they did in Washington State is that they had, and I guess it would almost be similar to whether it's Arguita or some other agency that was tasked to make sure that before a project of whatever, a private company that has at least 10 years experience of writing RFPs writes the RFP. And if it results in being something that the RFP was written poorly, then they have some liability exposure with respect to the project. And I'll give you an example, because I thought it was going to be, I've shared this with the Vice Speaker, but I really think that there's a way that would really not involve a lot of money from the government, and this may sound silly, but I really think the government of Guam could build a brand new government hospital using new market tax credits and some other creative things. And we were having this little discussion with some people in Seattle during the conference I took, and that was the very thing they said, was that whether it's a hospital, whether it's a government building, whether it's anything, pay that money to that person. They said, oh, by the way, Pete, we'll bring somebody in that you can meet and talk to tomorrow. I asked him, let's assume a $200 million hospital, how much would you charge to write the RFP? He said, well, between $35,000 and $40,000. And, it's amazing. But there are really and I'm finding them in LA, I'm finding them in San Francisco. Of course, you're going to have the big firms that are going to charge you $300,000 to do it. But there's pockets of people out there that have the expertise that I think can be easily found through, relationships we all have here, relationship with people in our business community. I know now of a couple that I think, or they've already indicated, they'd be more than willing to help write RFPs, and especially for technical ones. It's different for if you're going to get a bunch of Xerox machines, but I think that, it really models what they're doing in the Philippines of having this feasibility study that helps govern how you then proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker. Thank you for being here. Two things come to mind. One is we've also gotten legislation passed for PPT for our school facilities and maintenance of it. And while you all talk about you didn't replace any jobs, I think one of our biggest challenges here is the fear of losing a job. And so I understand the need for a feasibility study, but I'm thinking that it would also take leadership to absolutely say this is what we're going to do. Because that's been, I think, over 2 years that Senator Tom Abbott passed that with us. And so then we continue to struggle with our facilities needing help. And it's really something that just, for me, if somebody there, DOE, would say, this is what we're going to do, and that investment would come, and we no longer have to worry about broken air conditioners or all the things that we do worry about today, right? So the feasibility study, absolutely, but also the will, right? The green light to say, this is what we're going to do. That is very critical, isn't it? The leadership. Yeah. And so then, and the second thing that comes to mind is something that Pete is describing right now. I'm at the table, a lot of tables, talking about our mass transit system. And so there's an opportunity to energize an IFB for multi-year service. And so that's the conversation, is to write it right and to get that out, and then partner with the private businesses for them to take care of it, right? And the government, of course, will still have authority over it, but let those folks who are experts in it do it. And so, I appreciate you sharing how you've learned and your best practices. But if you did come up with particular lessons about a section that to get the buy-in, to get the people engaged to say that they would want to do this, I'd appreciate reading more about that, because I feel like we've just hit a brick wall there. And short of the boss, whoever that boss is, saying this is what we're going to do, because that's not happening. And so and then we continue, this legislature continues to pass legislation to help the department help themselves. But when there are already policies in place, I wish they would just act on it, right? But that's not happening. So the feasibility-based study and the buy-in and all of that. So, but thank you, because it gives us hope. For me, it tells me that things can happen, but you just have to have the mindset to want it to happen. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker.
Well, as you can see, we always hear the word fear. And in my 20 years of dealing with our government, fear was one of the factors why we did not progress so much on our infrastructure development. Fear, because in the Philippines, if you look at the political structure, from the undersecretary of the cabinet or department to the secretary are all politically appointed, while those under the undersecretaries are all career. Now, most projects originates from the career positions of any agency. And there is always that element of fear that, when they promote or initiate a project, they will be suspected of, trying to make something. If they have something to promote, there is a fear that the media will attack them, and so on. So the word fear really is something that is obstructing development. So again, that goes to the leadership issue. It's the political will that really brings a country for development. But could I make a point on the initial issue on funding from Germany and other European countries? You see, under a PPP, it is not the host government that will worry on raising money. It will be the project proponent, it will be the private sector that will arrange from the syndicate of funders and equity funders to invest on their projects. So it does not carry any government guarantee on this matter. The importance of the PPP law or the BOT law is it provides an environment for the private sectors to see to it that there is level playing field and there is no so much human interference in terms of the processes. It will not be a case-to-case basis. So it will be a uniform standard application of the law when it is considered a PPP project. I don't know how the state approves, identifies a project, but what is important is agencies that requires developmental projects should be able to identify what do they need to improve a public service. Then what is necessary upon identification? Do you have what you call our equivalent of the National Economic Development Agency that really approves, evaluates such project? So the initiating agency provides all the necessary requirements to bring it to the NEDA for evaluation and approval. Once it is approved by NEDA, then it goes to the bidding process. And during the bidding process, there are timelines. You know, number of days, publication, etc., etc., criteria for approvals, and so on. In the Philippines, we have two procurement process. You have what you call the Republic Act 9184. That is a procurement of goods and services funded by the government. So it will be coming from the funds from the government. It comes from the budget. All projects, all procurement should be covered by a national budget, which is a law in the Philippines. We call it the Annual Appropriation Law. Then you have the bidding process for PPP projects, which will be governed by the Republic Act 7718. So, I think draw the line, establish that environment that will invite private investors, and to be able to, assuming you have no budget for the preparation of the studies of this project, under the law you have what you call the solicited proposals, which of course the government should spend for the initial development cost of the project, including feasibility studies, or what you call the unsolicited proposal, wherein the private sector will finance everything from identification of the project to feasibility study, complete details. And once the private sector submits this to the government, then the government will evaluate it under the same process, evaluation, the proposal, etc. Once approved, it goes to, because it is unsolicited, it goes to Swiss challenge. You have to publish that within 90 days, be transparent, identify everything that has been provided by the proposals, then ask internationally a counter proposal that the government of Guam have received a proposal to do this with the cost of this. Anybody interested? Then you can make an offer. But in fairness to the original sector who provided that unsolicited proposal, who invested time and money, should be given the right of first refusal to match. If he cannot match, you give it to the person who submitted a lowest counter proposal. So I think the law is very important because it will be providing an environment to have uniform procedures for evaluating PPP projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker, and thank you very much for your presentation. I think the only big difference, and that was the question I was going to ask you, and you had just answered about the unsolicited bid and having the first right of refusal, because otherwise, who then will be paying for the feasibility study should the company not be awarded the contract. So are you saying then that if, although you have the right to, the first right of refusal to counter what was proposed, and if you're unable to, then you would forgo then the cost, and will then the company, the new company who would get the bid, will they have access to that feasibility study?
Well, the original proponent for the unsolicited proposal took all the risks. But there are some proprietary information, especially the technical, which the winning bidder should have prepared by themselves. But if they need that information, then they could negotiate with the losing bidder if they want to buy the proprietary information on that project. They have the option to get it from the losing bidder or the losing proponent.
So then
But it's not mandatory, though.
So are you suggesting then that maybe when we write the legislation or amend the legislation, that feasibility studies then be done prior to the bidding process, that the cost of that particular project would have, that we're going to build in rather the total cost of the project inclusive of the feasibility study? Okay, that sounds good. Of course, I know that my colleague, the other woman on the other end, and I had been working on several issues with the Department of Education, and there were legislations passed some time ago where they allowed the department to go out now to outsource, is what we use, outsource custodial work in our schools. And most of our schools are, the custodial services are fully privatized, some are partially, and only a few is actually done by the department, because as they attrition out or retired, then those individuals are all kind of moved to one particular school to house them. Now, the department is saying, and of course, and we have passed legislation authorizing them to do a feasibility study to make the determination whether it would be more cost effective to totally privatize it, outsource it, or then would it be much cheaper in the sense is to just hire their own for the entire department. And of course that study has not been done. So, this conversation of course is, very interesting to us, that we probably need to go further. So that's one, the custodial aspect of it. The other, of course, is maintenance. And that's a recent legislation that we put first then to do the study for the renovation of about 40 schools. And we're basing this whole notion, of course, of the Army Corps of Engineers doing a preliminary study, not as thorough, of course, as any company who's going to be awarded the bid to go in and do the renovations, came up with a dollar amount, and that's all we really could work with. But we don't know, of course, what the actual cost will be. But the idea is to yes, do the study first. And actually we did in that bill, that law right now, is that the study be inclusive of the entire contract. So I can see already that we are moving in the direction that you're talking about, but not, of course, fully. So, it just, I guess, would allow us to, consider, as the Vice Speaker, of course, and Senator Ada, who is working very closely on the procurement laws, and maybe some of these things that could be, amended then to, to kind of fall in line with what you're offering. But the biggest problem for us is that, yes, we are a U.S. territory, and we don't have access, to a lot of these foreign monies. But I'm definitely very interested in this new tax market. I think that that's something that, truly we can look into. So, thank you.
You brought up a point that kind of process of identifying where the money is going to come from, at least from a private sector standpoint, I want to share with you, and I don't know if you read the biography of Cesar and George, but they were actually, before the medical city showed up, they were the people that took the first risk with respect to the hospital on Guam. They have extensive real estate development, but I think they probably invested initially about $3 to $4 million just in due diligence. A whole bunch of work of visiting various United States hospitals, and then later brought in some other money. Now, the parent company of who owns the Guam Corporation is a company that 20% is owned by a San Francisco equity fund, and that's all the San Francisco equity fund that basically manages Canadian retirement funds that want to invest outside of the United States, and also California retirement funds. Their mandate of this equity fund is only to invest in Asia, and so also another shareholder is a Singapore company. So for me personally, it's not so much. I believe that investors are going to go to a place where they're going to get a good return on their investment, and the money will come from anywhere. It can come from India. It can come from England. We actually have. There's a couple of businesses here where the majority shareholder is from London. So I think that maybe we need to make a distinction, is that it's not so much the government that is looking for the source of the money from different countries. It'll be the job of the private investor that will look for those funds. The last question I had, and you can probably answer this better. There was a time back when I was in the Chamber of Commerce before, when I was chairman. Before that, I was on chairman of the Legislative Review Committee, and we came up with a suggestion at the time to the legislature, which was actually passed, where developments at the time, especially during the growth of our tourism industry, before it goes to the TOUC for approval, it goes to the I'm trying to think of the name now. It's not the subcommittee. It's like the group of agencies that make the recommendation. Yes, but what happened was there was no timeline for the decision, so it was holding up the territorial or the TLUC from making decisions, and literally 6 months would go by, and a developer that wants to do a hotel or something couldn't do anything. So the question I had for Cesar and George is, under the laws of the Philippines, is there any time frame that the feasibility study has to be completed in order to continue to go on of what's going to benefit the community as well as the government and the private investor?
Actually, there is no minimum or maximum period wherein the feasibility should be completed, because there is no project identified yet. But once the project has been approved and put up in the bidding process, within 180 days, it should be awarded. From the time it is published, there is a timeline for that. 45 days after publication, bid submission, then another 45 days, bid evaluation, then there should be an award, not more than 180 days, something like that, a provision. But the identification and the preparation of the feasibility, there is no timeline for that, because that all depends on the initiating agency. If it is budgeted to finance the feasibility study, then it should be completed within the budget period, which is not more than 1 year.
Yes, but Cesar, for the unsolicited, I think it's important that there is some process of approving the proponent for the unsolicited proposal, because not anybody can just come in and say, I want to write a proposal to you, right? There should be an approval process for the proponent to start the feasibility study. And obviously, that person will be making an investment, and therefore, he can expect also the equivalent of the government will look into the feasibility with a certain guideline so that he can proceed to the next step.
And Mr. Vice Speaker, if I may, and I'm glad that hear you say that because I think we would not be where we're at today with one particular school because there was an unsolicited bid in testimony of the bill that we had proposed to rebuild a school, and the unsolicited bid was definitely, I mean, almost 1/4 the amount that the government finally entered into because of that whole notion that because it's an unsolicited bid, that we just want to totally stay away from that company because of the fact that they were public about it. But I think maybe, like you say, that there has to be some process to be able to protect the procurement process and to ensure transparency. And then at the same time, I think with that caveat of having the right of your first refusal, but more or less is to really make sure then is that, yeah, if somebody else is going to come in at that same dollar amount, I can too. And I think that that to me would be much more, palatable for the government. Thank you.
And of course, there's an understanding as well of the scope of work of the unsolicited proposal. It may not be, defined in detail, but there is a given scope. You cannot just go and say, I want to capture this and I want to capture that, right? It's a given scope.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker, and thank you very much for being here, Mr. Sgro, as well for bringing them here. In the feasibility studies that you talk about, how important and how critical is it for, let's say, in healthcare, right? To have a strategic plan or a master plan, like for Guam, we don't have a health planning. We used to have a health planning agency that really maps out and is supposed to look at all the healthcare services, so that if a new hospital or a new service would like to come to Guam, then you have this available. So how important is having that in healthcare or in infrastructure? How important and how critical is that?
Of course, it's very critical. It will be easier for the proponent if all those data is available. For example, when we started looking at this Medical City Hospital, the only information we have, actually, Peter has been gathering that for the past years. It's all in his computer, but it's in a different location. So when we were looking, apparently you have those information. For example, the kind of the type of diseases that you have here. We'd like to know who are the payers, and Peter has all this information which had been gathering over time. It would have been nicer if the government has, as an agency, has those information ready for the proponent. Then the process will be cut short. So when he mentioned that we made investment, yes, that's where we made investment. We spent on getting consultants to understand where the revenues are coming from, how much money are going off island, and how much was spent off island, and what will be the savings if the services are being rendered here in the country, and what are the gaps in terms of rooms, the gap in terms of facilities, all of these things, and up to the point where we have to spend on the design of the building, identifying a location because the design will differ for different locations. The price of land valuation is different. So all these things fall into the study. And yes, to answer your question, if you have an agency doing that, obviously it will be much easier for the proponent. The process is shorter. This process that we did with Peter took 2 years. 2 years and maybe...
Before they got other investors, just their due diligence.
Yes. 2 years, and we have to put in the seed money to have a land because no investor would come in without a Cezar. By the way, Cezar is our strategist and visionary. I'm the executioner, so I'm the one who say, "Chico." So when Cezar says this looks good, so okay, then we go ahead and we confer with each other in the golf course on whether this is valid or not. So
Actually, it was my unconscious effort to advise Peter on how to proceed with the development of the hospital. When Peter was the chairman of the Guam
healthcare.
Healthcare Development Foundation, presented his plans. Then I said, Peter, that's not the way to promote and develop a project. First, there should be sponsor. And who is your sponsor? It's not the foundation. So you should have a sponsor. That sponsor should be a corporation. Where is your location? Where is the office?
Business
And
plan.
who is going to operate the hospital? So Peter, you will never be able to build that hospital unless you have all the ingredients of a successful project development. So I said, organize a corporation. We ended up putting up a corporation. And then, and the law firm is our office.
It's a starting point, yeah.
And then, operator, which should be a U.S.-based hospital because Guam is a U.S. territory. So Peter suggested UPMC, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center,
We'll look at several, the Adventists and also.
and the Adventist in California. And when they were about to come, we don't have that property where to show to them where to locate the hospital.
We're gonna write a book about this.
So I said, George, you sign up on that proposal for the land before this UPFC guys. so that's the history.
Oh, there is. That's it.
That's why.
And now we are
I do
happy,
refer to him
we're
as my
laughing.
business mentor.
Now we're laughing that it's about to be completed this year.
I wanted to add something. Senator Rodriguez said something that I thought was kind of important. Recently, we all read in the news about public health losing. It was like losing all of the data just got lost. First, I understand. There was this talk among some government employees that, geez, there's this company we have contracts with that own all the data, and the thing is that if you read a federal statute, no company that does IT work for a government owns any data. If you read all the statutes on this, and there's case law to this, the data is owned by the people of Guam. In our
With the
case,
government of Guam.
it's owned by the government of Guam. Now, I got a chance. I'm not going to say the name of the company, but I finally got a chance to see the contract of a company that does millions of dollars with our government for years, and the provision in there that says they own all the data is completely illegal. Now, my birth certificate is owned by me. I paid for it. Your, your father's death certificate, it's owned by the family, and that's a federal statute that basically differentiates between a private organization that has an IT system and a government organization that has an IT system, because the IT system is being paid by the very people that it's supposed to service. So the reason I bring that up is I think that that's something that needs to be carefully looked at, because the technology that's being used is so outdated. I'm sure you've heard of cloud computing. I mean, it's not as difficult as everybody thinks it is, but if what happened at public health, and no difference than what we do with this in saving it in the cloud. If the government of Guam had a system just like this, and what happened at public health where everything crashed, there would have been no need to have to manually put everything back in. It would have taken literally one push of a button, depending on where the data center where all of the government's data is being stored. So from a healthcare standpoint, I have to say that I think one of the most difficult challenges that not only our foundation faced, but then learning from the developer, it was so hard for us to find healthcare data. I think that what really helped us is when finally all the health insurance companies were willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement and give us data of how many people are leaving off island, what is the chronic disease and why they're leaving off island. That was very, very helpful. But in terms of trying to find a lot of health-related data, it was very difficult. So I can appreciate what you're saying.
Can I just ask one last question? Something that gets lots of press on Guam is protest. In the PPP, how is protest dealt with?
Well, I think you especially in the Philippines. You know, I think we are more democratic than the Americans. You can bring us to court, they can bring us. But again, the political will of any administration is very important. Protests can be well addressed again if there is transparency. Transparency is very important. Secondly, communications. You have to be able to communicate the benefits to the public versus the cost of the project. So you have to communicate. It's a PR campaign. You have to disclose or show that the project is transparently awarded. It can never be questioned. Then, at the end of the day, of course, there should be public hearing necessary, and whatever is the result, you have to, they have to accept it. Now, there are professional protesters in the Philippines that protest anything, anything, Now, we built the first toll bridge in West Bengal in Calcutta, in India. We submitted our unsolicited proposal in 1994. We signed the concession agreement in 2003. Completed the project in 2007. Started operations. On the first day of our operations, which was around April 2007, all truck drivers are protesting in front of the State Minister's office in Calcutta, complaining about the toll fees that we are going to charge in using the toll bridge. This is the second private toll bridge, and there is a public bridge. But there was a law that was passed prohibiting trucks to pass the old bridge. They should pass through the private toll bridge, because that was the condition of the investments that we made. So all truck drivers are protesting. And after 2 days, we were able to, dispel the continuance of the protests. So this is, as I've said, it's very critical that there should be a balancing act between the interests of the private proponent and the public. And you have to always weigh down the benefits and advantages against, whichever side. And sometimes the acceptability of these charges, again, will be subject to protest. So in cases where projects are very critical, it's needed, but the amount of charges is something that is not acceptable to the public, then you can apply what you call the hybrid financing, wherein part of it will be coming from the government and part of it will be coming from the private sector. So that's some sort of a hybrid financing. I'll give you an example. Most projects under the PPP, the maximum term for the loan that we raise are between 7 to 10 years. That is the maximum term of a loan that can be given to a private sector. However, the Japanese International Cooperation Agency provides funding for 30 years. So it is only the government that can really avail of these credit facilities. So how do we, go around that requirement where it should be the government? Today, our government bids out a project to construct a certain highway funded by a loan from JICA. Then after completion of the project, bids this out to the private sector for operations and maintenance. And the private sector will now assume the repayment of the 30-year loan. So, you see, the government, was able to mitigate that prohibition where the private sector cannot avail of a 30-year funding from international funding agencies. Government enters first into the loan agreement. Upon completion, bids it out and transfer the responsibility to the private sector. So many ways of, the word PPP actually is not build, operate, transfer. There are so many schemes. Build, operate, transfer, build, own, operate, build, rehabilitate, operate, maintain. Sometimes you build, lease, transfer, many schemes. What is important is the private sector and the public sector working together for the implementation of a development project. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for the public, it's Bill 3-32, and in Bill 3-32, we have 9 different types of schemes.
Okay.
And as Dr. Quiambao had mentioned, I promised Peter that I would finish in time so that you'd get to your chamber hearing on time. He said 10:45, and I'm looking at the time. So I want to thank all 3 of you for coming, and especially Dr. Quiambao for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. Also you, Mr. Yulo. And Peter, thank you very much for sharing your guest with us, and we look forward to the presentation at the chamber this afternoon. At this time, I'd like to call this meeting to a close, and again, Cezar Quiambao for all that you're doing, and hopefully we can move this legislation sometime soon before the end of this term. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.